I killed the last honorable man 15
In honor
years
of
ago.
Priest Fallon. To defeat my enemy, I extinguish his life and consume him as I consume these flames.
Welcome back to Cocktail Cinema, your weekly movie review podcast. As always, I'm your first favorite bartender, third favorite author, Josh Price, and I am joined by my co-host, Greg, and our producer, Shasti.
Hey. Yo. Glad to be here.
Now, I know I seem a little somber, but that's just because the topic of discussion today is a little bit heavier. So this week we're going to be reviewing The Gangs of New York. This movie came out in 2002. It was directed by Martin Scorsese. It had a budget of $100 million and a box office return of $193.8 million. So not quite as big as I expected, but still, you know, a successful film as far as Hollywood goes.
Still gets a lot of play nowadays, for sure.
Oh, for sure. And I mean, this kind of falls into Scorsese's historical realm. He likes to do movies that are based on true stories. So like we've got Goodfellas, and I believe he did Wolf of Wall Street, right?
I believe so. And also a lot of other like musicians, you know, like the Last Waltz.
Last Waltz,
like that.
yeah, that was his first big one.
Yeah. So
yeah. So this is definitely in his vein, but it's definitely his oldest gangster film. So this movie's set in the mid 1860s. I believe the majority of the film takes place in like 1864. So right in the middle of the Civil War, and you know we had race riots going on. We had conscription riots, and New York was just upside down.
Yep.
And so that's the setting for possibly one of the most violent popular movies to be made.
Right.
Like this is more violent, I'd say, than even Braveheart.
I mean, that opening sequence and the ending sequence, they bookmark so crazy. So much going on. I mean, lethal, violent, but very, very choreographed and very well done.
Yeah. And, you know, starting at the end might not be a bad idea because with a movie like this, you expect, with all the buildup for the revenge story,
right,
you expect there to be this big showdown between, our big bad and our big good. And that almost happens. And then all of a sudden, the military starts to fire upon the city and just chaos ensues.
And you kind of realize how small that their vengeance story really is at that point.
Yeah.
Which a lot of people were turned off by that ending, you know, because it was kind of a anticlimactic feel to it. But I mean, at the end, the bad guy got his day.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's, I don't know. I kind of like this movie better than even like The Godfather. I think it's paced really well. I mean, it's a long movie, but it's paced well. And it tells a story that I engage with in ways that I don't engage with a lot of gangster films.
Right. So
it's because so many of Scorsese's films and films in that vein talk about the rags to riches, but they get to the point of opulence so quickly that you don't really see the main character struggle. But in this movie, even the guy at the top, even Bill the Butcher, is not necessarily a man of opulence. Right. He still lives in the slums. Right. He just happens to be, the richest poor person.
And to add to that, it's weird because following Leonardo DiCaprio's character, you kind of there's a lot of weird convolution in this movie. You know what I mean? So you don't, at the end, you're not really necessarily rooting for Amsterdam. You know what I mean? That, from what I gather and what I took away, it's like he went from like that guy. You're like, yeah, go get him. But Bill the Butcher, like he grows on you, and you realize that they're very much the same kind of person. So like it's almost like evil versus evil. At the end of this movie, it's kind of
bad versus evil.
You know, when at first, you're Amsterdam sent to boarding school or whatever it was called, and you want him to come back and kill that guy that killed his dad. But then you realize that they're both walking a parallel path, and him being under the wing of the Butcher and everything like that. It's like, is there really a good versus evil story here, or is it just like it seems like more of a Civil War story kind of thing, or a nation in strife kind of story?
Well, there's definitely a lot of humanization of our villain here, because like even in the opening scene, after the fight with Priest Valen, Bill the Butcher's like, no one is to touch this priest.
Right.
He was an honorable man.
No one
takes a trophy from his body. So, for as despicable as he is, he does have some qualities that you can't hate. And I like that in a villain, because I mean, nobody's pure evil. Nobody. Like, there's a reason that, serial killers are so well liked. It's like, nobody's that bad. They just do things that are that bad. And Bill the Butcher's a really good example of that, where he does take this orphan under his wing, not knowing who he is. Even after he finds out who he is willing to give the kid the benefit of the doubt until, Amsterdam
that dagger's
attempts
thrown.
Yeah. And I don't know. It makes it a very difficult. It makes it tough to dislike him, even though when you look at it on paper, he's absolutely the villain.
Right, and I think that goes into how perfect Daniel Day-Lewis was for this role. We've talked about a lot of different villains and how they fill the role very well, and casting was great. The performance he gave, I'll rival against any performance that has ever walked film history.
Yeah,
what he did with that character, pure greatness. I swear,
totally.
Chef's kiss to that one. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and he's really kind of the last of a dying breed as far as true method actors go.
Yeah, okay.
Where, Jared Leto, people like to say he's a method actor. No, he's just a dick. But in reality, Daniel Day-Lewis absorbs his roles, and it's not like they become him. It's he really tries to get into the head of those people that he's portraying, so that if he has to believe the role, he has to believe what he's doing.
And I was
you can
told,
tell that he
much,
believes
much
it.
like a lot of the Joker, Nicholson and Heath Ledger, he didn't break role through the whole realm of it. And I guess from what I was I saw an interview. It took Scorsese a long time to get him into this role. He hasn't acted in 5 years. He was done with it, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And to hear this British actor, kind of soft spoken at times, to have that crossover to the Butcher, man, it's like, holy smokes!
It takes a toll on you. You
Yeah,
know what I mean?
absolutely.
Because he, like you said, he didn't break that role one time. You can argue that he didn't break that role even when he went home.
True.
And the entire time prepping for the movie, he was taking lessons from butchers on how to properly cut meat.
Yeah.
So he can be educated, sit there with a knife and the one scene.
And the color and it's sharpened. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's just one of those things. He didn't. He takes that home with him when everybody clocks out for work. Daniel Day-Lewis takes that role home with him, and
you can see it.
Why he was reluctant, maybe.
Yeah, it's a lot. That's a lot to take on, is what I'm saying.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? He's got to be thinking about that as he's looking at a script. It's a 3-hour movie.
Right.
Yeah.
It's.
It's
admirable for sure.
Think about how beautiful those cuts were. I did notice that.
Yeah, and just his nice skills, just how he wields it. You know what I mean? It's just comfortability in that. You know what I mean? It's
he
not
took
just
vocal lessons for how people in New York talked at that time.
Right. I think Leo did too, from what I understand too. There was, up and down. Huge actors in this movie. You know what I mean? Like Leonardo, Daniel Lewis, Cameron Diaz, Jim Broadbent, John C. Reilly, Liam Neeson. Come on, this is a huge movie. You know what I mean? It's just. They all did really well.
Well, and I think, we think about Leo as being this phenomenal actor today. I don't think he would be on the level that he's at without having worked side by side with Daniel Day-Lewis and Brendan Gleeson and Scorsese.
Right, and look how many Scorsese movies he's been in. You know what I mean? Obviously, saw something in the kid. This movie was nominated for, I think, 10 Oscars. They didn't win any of them, but to be nominated for that many roles, supporting actors and main, it's noteworthy for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's just unfortunate because it's going up against the Lord of the Rings in that year, you know. So, and what's funny is the guy who scored the Lord of the Rings, Howard Shore, also scored this film.
Busy man, huh?
So he was out for an Oscar.
Yeah.
He was gonna get it one way or another.
For sure.
And I would say the only thing I don't like about this movie is Bono's stinking lyrics over that last song. if it's just the music, if it's just the music for the hands that built America, it's wonderful. Yeah. As soon as Bono starts singing, it's like, you phoned this one in.
I should have been Flogging Molly.
Right.
Right.
It was bad.
Yeah, something Irish.
Like the music itself is good.
Yeah. I mean,
even
those
that, like,
lyrics, random like horn, like a recorder, like it's like a piercing, but it's like it's so necessary to add to that.
So.
I mean, it was like a whistle bagpipe. It wasn't even like a bagpipe. It was like a fucked up flute.
It was an effect that Edge had on it.
Nice. No, I mean, the movie
the wrestler Edge.
Yeah. Rated R superstar.
There you go. No, the movie moves. It moves really well. I mean, there's so much to pack into this 2 hour, 3 hour almost movie. We're talking political crap that crosses over into the religion and the same kind of stuff we've been fighting for centuries. Protestants versus Catholics and
social issues, class issues.
Exactly.
Yeah, very much.
Religious.
The troubles in Ireland.
And a lot of that stuff, a lot of those the cool part about this movie is not necessarily all factual. Obviously, Scorsese moved around and made the story what he wanted, but they used like these big pictures, these big scopes of camera that were true to, like, say the papers of that time, like the lynchings that were going on and the bombs and how it kind of closely matched up to what these the firemen or volunteer firefighters were actually fighting each other over this kind of stuff.
They were gangs.
And it was political.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. So it's really, looking at it now, it's like, holy smokes, like this is kind of and the detail that goes into these scenes, these sets, it's groundbreaking. I feel like the only problem I have with this movie is there is a little bit too much information at one time, and it's hard to grasp. I've watched it plenty of times. This one, it's a little bit bogged down in the center, but I think that was intentional because they wanted to kind of draw off of the vengeance story and bring it back into like kind of an American history story.
Yeah,
I don't know. That's just kind of what I took.
Well, I mean, you can kind of make a comparison to Seabiscuit, where both of these films are based on books that are like nonfiction books that are made into more or less biopics. Seabiscuit is more, very much about a factual person, right, whereas Amsterdam is a product of historical fiction, but everybody around him was real.
Right.
Like the cop was real, like Happy Jack and Bill the Butcher was real.
Yeah,
Tammany.
William Poole, and Tammany Hall is a real place. They used real signatures of the city.
So there's and real life doesn't fall into 3-act structures. So sometimes in order to get a film like this, you have to either amplify certain aspects of reality and kind of exaggerate them, or you have to cut off the story at a certain point, which I think he does a good job of, because after the fight with Bill the Butcher, the story just ends, and it's like, we're going to be forgotten. And there's that closing narration where everything that happened here today will just be forgotten to the sands of time. And we watch the graves get overgrown, and
the city,
the city builds up,
as the memory,
and then there's that final shot with the Twin Towers, which you realize this was filmed in 2001, so if they had missed filming by even a couple of months, those wouldn't have been there. Right. So even in context of our current history today, it holds a very special place. But yeah, my thoughts are a little muddled just because there are so many. There's a lot about this movie that I find very endearing, and it's not even necessarily the character of Amsterdam, despite how good Leo does. It's not anything in particular that I latch onto. It's just all these pieces come together so well that it's greater than the sum of its parts.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it, for sure.
Now,
putting some parts together.
I would like to give you a little bit of history about our drink today.
All right.
So, New York in the 1860s was, it had a very high Irish population. The Irish made whiskey.
Obviously. All right.
So the Manhattan, naturally, was a whiskey drink. Now, the original Manhattan recipe was equal parts whiskey and vermouth. So what you have in front of you today is an ounce and a half of whiskey, an ounce and a half vermouth, 3 splashes of our cherry bitters, and a 1/4 ounce of simple syrup. Now you'll notice there is no maraschino cherry in here, and that's because even though in the 1860s, 1870s, the maraschino cherry did come to America, it was such a delicacy that it would not have been available in the 5 points.
Unless
so you have
the rammer horns or whatever.
you have a Manhattan that would have been drank in that time period in that area.
Salud.
So cheers, boys.
Cilantro. Irish. Okay. Woody.
Yeah. Yeah. I kind of like this balance more than like modern Manhattans. Like a modern Manhattan is only like a 1/2 ounce of vermouth. I like this balance of 1 to 1. It's much more smooth.
And it goes with the movie because there is that great balance you kind of left off on. Can't pick out one thing that's great about this movie. It's set, it's play, it's character, it's growth, it's acting. It's a phenomenal movie. I mean, like I said, the middle is a little bit muddled for me, but looking back, it's all there. You know what I mean? It's really all there.
Well, this is a phenomenal script with phenomenal actors in the hands of a phenomenal director. You know, and even Howard Shore, one of the greatest film composers. This is just firing on all cylinders. In all honesty, the only reason it wasn't winning Oscars was it was up against films like The Lord of the Rings in 2002.
Yeah.
So it's not for its own lack.
I know, and there was so much of that like 10-year span where it's like Leo deserves an Oscar. Give Leo an Oscar.
Well, he had to be mauled by a bear to get an Oscar.
Right. That's pretty much like here. It's like a gift, but whatever.
No, I love this movie. I really do. And like I said, like watching it this time, I realized I like it better than The Godfather. I think it's a more cohesive gangster film, which is really what it is. Now, not necessarily gangster in the terms of Michael Corleone, but, you know, it's a gangbanging movie. And it's probably the most American pastime is gangbanging, you know? Like, even though they kind of tone down...
Organized crime.
Yeah.
Call it.
Well, it's not even organized.
I know, you're right. But I mean, like
it's disorganized crime.
Even to draw back into that history aspect, the Bowery Boys, legit. Dead Rabbits, legit. Like, he kept it close enough to the history story than... you know, one would realize, because I mean, watching this, I would be like, half of this is bullshit. Yeah, it is, but it's not. I mean, the setting and timing can be off. The technology during that time could be set wrong, but the people who use like William Poole was Bill the Butcher at that time, and they held on to like his last quote, like finally I'll be killed as an American.
I die as a true American.
As a true American. I mean, that's on his headstone. You know, I mean, these are real people. Some of them.
Yeah.
Some of them.
Most of them.
Yeah.
So if not, they're based off of.
Right. Yeah, like even the Hellcat Mary. Like she was a notorious member of the Dead Rabbits, and like those claws that she had, that was really her trademark.
Right.
So there is a lot of historical accuracy here, and I'd be willing to go out on a limb here and say it's more historically accurate than a lot of historical films.
Right.
Sure, there's some anachronistic technology, but that's true of every historical film. They always get something in the wardrobe wrong or something. Yeah, it's just the way it goes. But for the most part, this is grounded very well in its time.
And I think also bringing in camera work on that helps too, because being able to have that broad span of like gang versus gang, almost like on dirt shots, and like I said, I talked about choreography and adding a little bit of flair here and there, and just movement. The movement, it was just insane for this. I mean, when they wanted it stationary, it was stationary. When the movie was moving, it was moving. I mean, it kind of goes into that timing aspect we were talking about, which helps move it along quite a bit for a 2-hour, 45-minute movie. You know, it's an easy watch. At the end, you're like, holy crap, you know, like when's it gonna end? But
well, see, I don't feel that way at the end. It's very emotional. I think it's
just the ending for me, like that anticlimactic ending I was talking about. It's just, you know,
I like that.
You want to see that like blood and guts kind of thing, but here come cannonballs from a ship that doesn't matter to the movie whatsoever, which is a good spin on it.
It does matter though, and so here's where I'm going to challenge you. Here's where I'm going to challenge you. Yeah. So the moment the conscription riots or the draft riots begin, that is when we start to telescope out from this singular moment where it's this fight between a bunch of historically insignificant people to what was going on in Manhattan and in the city at that time. And we're just telescoping out to the Civil War so that it's almost a dual telescope where the story is telescoping out. And then at the very end, when Leo's giving his closing narration and he's talking about how, everyone's going to forget what happened here today, and we're watching the city grow and overgrow and forget. Both of those, like, we've seen 3 visuals.
They were already painting that picture.
Yep. They were giving us those ideas so that narration hits home. Yep. And that's why when it goes to black and just the Gangs of New York graphic, that moment lingers with you. And it was very intentional.
Bill the Butcher also earlier in that movie, not too far from the end, says civilization's crumbling.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's like, it's pretty much just kind of crossing hands, like generation gap kind of thing, which I think a lot of it came down to anyway was his old man versus this gangster, this butcher, and there was like a kind of a trade-off, like almost like a relay runner. You know what I mean? He just passing the baton kind of thing. And even though they were supposed to be good versus evil, good versus bad, vengeance, it was the same thing. It was passing that baton to get to that next chapter and show the growth, So it was done really well, man. This is a really good movie for sure.
Yeah, and I mean, to tag on to what you're talking about there, I mean, Brendan Gleeson's character, he tries to bring the 5 points into that next stage. He's like, we can either battle it out.
Irish sheriff.
We can either battle it out, in the old ways, or you can come up here and we can have a civilized conversation. We can try and solve our differences diplomatically.
Yep.
Or I think he says democratically.
Democratically, yeah.
Yeah.
So. Yeah. And then he gets a cleaver to the back.
Yeah, which shows that Bill was never going to step into the next stage of the world. And Amsterdam now has the chance to leave for San Francisco and live in this new world as a new man. And because he watched so many of his friends die, and he watched what the old ways do to a society. Like, it's almost barbaric the way this country came into its own.
Oh, 100%. 100%.
And
still
like
is.
it makes me proud that we aren't like that now. That there were men like that sheriff who stood up and said, I can either bash your brains in, or we can sit down and talk and we can be men. Because we're talking about a time period where the understanding of what it meant to be a man was moving from caveman to politician.
Right. And then this guy just went from caveman to politician to martyr.
Yeah.
So it moves.
It does. And
it moves you.
There's just so much power in the dialogue here. And Scorsese is not usually known for his particular dialogue. Like, yes, it's good, but he's not usually in the conversation with Tarantino or the Coen brothers,
But he creates scenes.
He does. And in this movie, he creates the dialogue.
Exactly. Yeah.
And it's very poignant and memorable. Like the fact that we can spout these lines off. It's a 3-hour movie, and we've given most of the memorable lines here in this conversation.
I mean, there's a few that we can't really talk about, but
right, yeah.
Which is funny too, but it also showed the time. I mean, the Irish were the minority, the people that were hated coming over on these boats by like 1,500 a week, they said, or 15,000 a week. So it's, I'm Irish, you're Irish, you might be a little Irish, we're all Irish, kind of thing. So it's one of those things that wrap your head around what we're dealing with now. They took our jobs, kind of stuff. Come on, man.
Yeah,
like,
we've always
been a
this
melting
way.
pot. Come on,
we've always been this way.
Yeah,
and this really shows that, like, that we've always. Bill the Butcher says he led by fear. He kept control by using fear, and that's what our leaders have always done. There's always been a faction of the population, a faction of our leadership that has tried to make us afraid of the other, and it's very tribalistic. And I think we are in a period of time currently where we can look at this movie and we have a chance to learn from our mistakes. And we have a chance to not fall into these same rivalries and tribalistic tendencies.
Right. And that goes to religion too. I mean, I mean, one would say that religion's based on fear as well. And even the Protestants versus Catholics, same kind of fight we've been talking about since the Crusades. You know what I mean? It's nothing new under the sun, right? I mean, it's just a good callback and kind of...
Ironically, that line is from a religious text. But
of course, that's what I mean. But no, it's... I guess that's where I'm going to end up there.
That's, I mean... To go any further would be to really give away the gems of the movie. And I think it's important that if you haven't seen this movie, please go watch it. It's available for streaming. Obviously, it's been on DVD for absolutely ever. It is worth watching and rewatching. But here at Sippable Opinions, we like to rate our movies out of 100 tacos, with 0 tacos being the worst and 100 being the best. Grego.
Yes.
What is your taco score for Gangs of New York?
Love the movie. Not my favorite Scorsese flick. I'm going to give this 86. 86
okay.
on my taco rating. It's worth every bit of those 86 tacos. Throw some extra guac on there.
Stark difference from our last
You're
film.
going to take a lot from this movie, whether it's the first time, second time, third time you watch it, a million times over. There's something to take away. And not breakout performance, but the actors in this movie, which I usually touch on quite a bit. We haven't really shared too much about them. Awesome job, Daniel Day-Lewis, Leonardo DiCaprio. I mean, down the line, great acting, great set, detail-oriented movie, fantastic camera work. That's where I stand. Yeah. Watch the movie.
Shasti?
I'll give Gangs of New York an 88.
Okay.
88 tacos. Like Greg was saying about this set, I wish we had a whole another half hour just to talk about that. But I believe that's the best set of any movie we've covered, and nothing comes close. Like Clue is the next one, and that's nowhere close to this. What went into this, but beyond what I believe is the greatest set in the world, what I believe is the greatest actor who's still alive, and Daniel Day-Lewis, and one of the greatest directors ever, Marty, and the script, honestly, too. You know what I mean? Like we touched a little bit on the amount of characters and the development. It's like you have, you're lucky enough to get 2 main actors, main roles in this film, but every other one of the supporting actors almost has their own prequel within the story. Yeah, you know what I mean? With it being 3 hours, you get 2 stories for every one of these other. Pretty much every character except for Bill, you get 2 stories.
100%. You really get immersed in the 5 points,
including Amsterdam. So 88, I said
86. I think he said 86.
I said 86.
He said 86, 88.
88.
I think I said 89, but I'm going 88.
All right,
one of those.
Fair enough.
One of those.
Fair enough. I'm going to give this a 93.
Okay.
This is a top 100 film for me. So for me, I try to keep my 90s ratings as like the top 100 films ever, and I think this is one of those movies. This is a movie you have to see both as like if you like movies, you should watch it. If you like history, you need to watch it. If you're a filmmaker, if you want to be a filmmaker, if you want to understand film, this is a movie to watch, because like we've been talking about, the acting, the directing, the sound design.
Look at something cool. It's visually stimulating the entire movie. So yes,
no, you're fine. You're fine. There's so many elements of filmmaking that are pristine in this project that it falls among the greats for me. This is our Julius Caesar. And we will watch that someday. But yeah, do we have the Rotten Tomatoes score? Let's take a look here. All right, so wow. So we have a critic score of 73 and an audience score of 81. Wow. So people clearly don't feel the way about it that I do.
It's okay.
But
because there's a lot going on. People. This is an ADD movie. You know what I mean? It's like there's so much going on. There's so much to take in a short amount of time. We talk these big epic movies, Godfather, and types of those direction. Not everybody can internalize that.
It took me three sessions over 3 days just because I want to make sure I'm not. Because I'm
not dozing off on it.
To internalize
I'm the first
that in
person
one watch.
who's gonna get up and start pacing around. Just not out of boredom from the movie, but
Right. Of
yeah.
course.
Based off what you're saying.
Of course. Yeah.
This is definitely not a movie
They're all wrong.
for a short attention, but still give it a shot. Give it a shot. Audience, hop down in the comments and let us know what your taco rating is for Gangs of New York. Do you agree with us? Do you agree with Rotten Tomatoes? Let us know why. As for the other stuff, you know all that. Like, subscribe, hop down to our Patreon if you'd like to support us a little bit more. We got some fun stuff going on there. We got a new pilot coming out soon. Some new shows, some new projects.
Super
All
exciting
that
for
said-
sure. Super exciting.
Grego, Shasti,
Josh.
thank you for coming
Audience.
along. This was a great Jaw session. Great Jaw session.
Agreed.
I love this movie and I love talking about it with you guys.
Yeah, for sure, man.
Pumpkin time has arrived. We gotta say goodbye.
Well done.